Today's topic for our BBU presentation is on politics and the midterm election in a 2016 presidential forecast. So I want to hand it over to our Assistant Vice President of Government and Community Relations, Vanessa Herman, and she is going to give us a fantastic presentation.
Okay. Thank you, Caitlin, and good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here today with you. As Caitlin said, my name is Vanessa Herman. I'm the Assistant Vice President for Government and Community Relations here at PACE. I will start out by giving you a little background about myself. I've been involved in politics in one way or another for over 24 years. I was born and raised in Long Island, and in 1991, I started working for then United States Senator Alphonse D'Amato, which sort of jump-started my career into politics and turned what was into a hobby into a career for me. I gave you my overall, this was just an overall summary, and these are the three things I'm going to be speaking about, and then on the federal level, and then I'll go into some New York State specifics after. So we started out with this map, and as we know now, the Republicans in the Senate picked up 7 seats, giving them control. Does not give them a supermajority, which would be 60 votes in the Senate, but they're pretty close, and they're obviously going to be a lot of play in the United States Senate next year to see how the Republicans handle this newfound majority. So Iowa and Colorado were the 2 toughest Senate losses for the Democrats. They were very confident they were going to keep those seats, and largely in part because Obama won both of those states twice. And the other 5 confirmed Senate seats that they picked up, those were all in red states, so it's not really a surprise that those became or remained Republican. Kay Hagan lost her seat in North Carolina. That was something that everyone had talked about a lot. And moving back and forth, former Massachusetts governor, and this was a race I had been watching because he's a potential 2016 presidential candidate, was former Massachusetts United States Senator Scott Brown, lost his bid to recapture a Senate seat in New Hampshire to incumbent Senator Jeanne Shaheen, who was a very popular figure in New Hampshire, but that race was a toss-up sort of going right into it. But Scott Brown did, in fact, lose that race. So, moving on, and this is just a little bit of what I talked about. As you can see, Kansas and Arizona, Kentucky, all the places, the red states where you would expect Republicans to do well. And then New Hampshire was the only place where the polls sort of didn't match up, if you will. And so moving on to the House. Bear with me while I catch up with myself here. So the House, as we said, picked up 12 seats. 3 of those were in New York State, and I'm going to talk a little bit about those. I know a lot of you are from Long Island, so this place, there's some new seats there. So Republicans in New York State now hold a 1/3 of the congressional seats. Due to redistricting, New York went from 29 congressional seats down to 27 in 2012. When the districts were redrawn. Now, the Democrats really predicted they were going to keep all their seats, so this was a little surprising for them here in New York. Perhaps the biggest win for the Republicans here in New York State was in the 1st congressional district, where I live, where I was born and raised, and that is where Democratic Congressman, 12-year incumbent Timothy Bishop, lost to New York State Senator Lee Zeldin. Zeldin lives in the district. He had great name recognition, and House Chairman John Boehner dumped over $8 million into the campaign. So between that and low turnout and many other factors, it would have been very, very difficult for Congressman Tim Bishop to win re-election in this year. In 2010, he had a very close re-election race with a challenger named Randy Alschuler, who was a businessman who sort of was a carpetbagger, according to the Democrats' portrayal of him. He moved into the district simply to run for Congress, which is something he had done years previous in New Jersey as well. And in 2010, Congressman Bishop won re-election by 564 votes, which is obviously a very small margin. And then the following year, he beat, in 2012, Randy Alschuler handily by over 53%. So Another big win for the Republicans came in central New York, where John Katko defeated Dan Maffei in the 24th district. This is a traditionally Republican district that's gone a little more Democratic in recent years, so that was a big win for them. And now in the North Country, Elise Stefanik won in the 21st district. What makes this so unique is she is the youngest woman ever to be elected to Congress. At the time of her election, back on election day, she was 30 years old. And for what I've read about her and what I've seen from her on TV, she's an exceptional young lady. So it's going to be interesting to watch and see what she does, what committee she goes on. Representative Michael Grimm, who, if you've read the paper or watched the news, is a Staten Island Republican who's up on some federal corruption and fraud charges. He easily won re-election against his lesser-known and not really qualified Democratic candidate. So that is a seat that it was kind of predicted would stay Republican, and it did handily. And something that I like mentioning is that Rep. Louise Slaughter, who's served in Congress for a very long time, as we know, her race was just called a few days ago. It was very, very close, the closest re-election bid she's ever had. She won by less than 880 votes. And from a higher education point of view, I will also mention that we have, with Congressman Bishop being retired from Congress and Carolyn McCarthy retiring of her own volition, unless someone steps up to the plate here in New York State, for the first time in decades, New York State will not have a representative on the House Higher Education Committee, which with the SUNY system, CUNY, and of course all the private universities here in the state like Pace, that would be a devastating blow to us. So a little midterm election analysis, if you will. So midterms are usually bad for the sitting president's party. And president approval ratings are a major factor in determining who wins in the midterm races. So the president isn't actually on the ballot, as we all know, but as you can see from the chart, there's a direct correlation of approval ratings and loss of seats in the House. And in the past century, it's happened only 3 times where gains in the presidential party have happened. In 1934, 1998, which was Bill Clinton's second term, and 2002, which was George Bush's first term. And those 3 instances are surrounded by what we would call extraordinary circumstances by any means. In 1934, there was the Great Depression. And in 1998, President Bill Clinton was facing impeachment charges. And in 2002, George Bush was into, obviously, the second year of his presidency, and it was shortly after 9/11, and the country was at war. So, and 214 has played into the very same pattern that we've seen with the low approval ratings the president had, which were hovering around 41% during Election Day. And that can easily translate into why the Democrats lost so many seats. And overall, midterm elections have always affected, helped Republicans. There's lower turnout, and the majority of people who vote in the midterm elections are white, and that has always helped. And this slide sort of exhibits that. That has, when there's a large turnout there's less turnout minority populations and higher turnout in the white population, that tends to benefit Republicans across the board, as we can see right here. So this is who voted in the 2014 election, according to the Pew Research Center. As you can see in the 2014 midterm elections, the largest turnout of voters by far are people aged 45 and older, who tend to be better educated, better off financially in many instances, and 65 and over, that went from 21% in 2010 to 16% in 2012, and then 22% in 2014. So it went up substantially from 2012 to 2014, but 2012 was a presidential election year, which we tend to see that fluctuate like that. Okay. So this shows voter turnout in 2014, pardon me. So these are just a couple headlines that I saw that caught my attention. They were both on November 10th. I guess that's when all this analysis finally came out. The cover of the Washington Post on November 10th said, voter turnout in 2014 was the lowest since World War II. And then online, on the PBS NewsHour website, 2014 midterm election turnout was lowest in 70 years. So the voter eligible population, the VEP, are people who are over the age of 18 and obviously they're able to vote. And it's usually much higher in midterm presidential election years. We usually see around 60% of the voter eligible population come out. In midterm elections, it's much lower, it's 40%. Now, comparatively, if you look at countries like Italy, Germany, Sweden, they get over 80% consistently for all of their elections. And here in the United States, it's a much different story. So, in 2012, which was a presidential election year, we had 58% of eligible voters turned out, and 62% in 2008, again, both presidential election years. So if you look at this chart, in 2010, only 41% of eligible voters voted, and this year, again, worst turnout since World War II, was approximately 36.4% of the voter eligible population showed out. So we have essentially 1/3 of our country's population is deciding in which way our government's going to move and progress and go forward. And for those of you keeping track, Maine had the highest voter turnout. I believe they were 59% was their turnout. And the lowest rate was in Indiana. Not sure why. So this is, I just wanted to show this to you because I mentioned it earlier. I'm missing a sheet of paper, Caitlin. Okay, I'm sorry. So the GOP had a good night in the state houses, and we saw that all across the country, and the Democrats were pretty optimistic going into this race, but it just wasn't going to happen. One of the races I was watching was in Florida, where Republican, then turned independent, and then he turned Democratic. Former Governor Charlie Crist was running to take back his governor's seat, and he did not win. And the Sam Brownback race in Colorado was something of interest because the Conservative Party in general wrote him off. They stopped putting money into the campaign, and he won, and he won fairly handily. So that was something that I think the Republican Party is going to take notice of and sit back and look at. So I'm going to switch to New York for a little bit here. Again, for those of us who have been following the elections, we know that incumbent Governor Andrew Cuomo defeated County Executive Rob Astorino by 53% to 41% margin. This is nowhere near the numbers that Governor Cuomo is accustomed to, and I'm sure he's very unhappy about that. He was trying to get over 72% of the vote, which was the best his father had ever done, and he made no secret about the fact that he wanted to do better than that 72% number. And something that's very interesting is out of all the counties in New York State, 46 of them were won by Republican challenger Rob Astorino, who has a base in upstate New York. He's based in Westchester. So I found that interesting. And Attorney General Eric Schneiderman won re-election, again, by a much smaller margin than most people anticipated. And Comptroller Tom DiNapoli, who is just by everyone's account doing a great job, he won easily. And something of interest that I like to share with people when we talk about elections is that Andrew Cuomo there were 3 statewide candidates on the ballot, and of all the 3 statewide candidates, Andrew Cuomo received the least amount of votes. The Attorney General and the Comptroller received more votes than the governor. I guess some people just got in the booth and just voted for everyone and just didn't want to vote for governor. So, switching over to the New York State Senate, which was in danger of going Democratic, which would have meant that we would have had a governor in the New York State Assembly and a Senate that was all Democratic, which we could probably spend a whole hour talking about whether that would be good or bad for New York State. So the GOP won 32 of the 63 seats, and Dean Skelos, Senate Majority Leader Dean Skelos, he was just voted yesterday back to his full position, does not have to co-lead with a group of rogue senators led by Jeff Klein from the Bronx, Democratic senators. So I'm going to chat a little bit about 2016. And again, I will say that these are just, as a student of politics and someone who probably watches way too much Fox News and CNN and MSNBC. I try to watch everything just to see what everyone's talking about. And so again, I think your guess is as good as mine at this point. So I'm going to talk a little bit now. I saw this cartoon. I wanted to share it with you. I thought it was funny. As we know, I think Hillary Clinton's campaign started a long time ago, but moving on. So these are, I guess, the primary candidates that we're seeing right now from the Democratic side. And of course, Vice President Joe Biden, it's very natural that a vice president from a two-term president would want to seek the nomination. He did not do well back in 2007 and then was chosen to be Obama's running mate back then. And now Hillary Clinton is obviously the candidate that everyone talks about most, and it's going to be interesting to see how that proceeds from a standpoint of the PACs and the organizations that are forming around her. And I will say that everyone that I have that you see on the slide right now has formed an exploratory 2016 presidential campaign committee. I'm not just pulling people out of the air. So, and Elizabeth Warren is constantly saying, well, one caveat, Elizabeth Warren does not have an exploratory committee. But I left her picture up there because much like Barack Obama in 2007, she's a young first-term senator, and she's really made a difference in the short time she's been in Washington, D.C., and I think she's someone to watch. And I think she'd be, if nothing else, certainly a wonderful vice presidential pick for the Democrats. And then we have Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia, who's been a very vocal opponent, and he does have appeal on the Republican side. The NRA favors him very heavily. He recently has been campaigning and pushing for Mary Landrieu in Louisiana, which we were talking about. So again, he has crossover appeal. And then Governor Martin O'Malley from Maryland is made no secret that he wants to seek higher office. So, and then second from the right is Bernie Sanders, who is an independent senator from Vermont. He's already said he's going to run, no matter who the Democratic or Republican nominee is, as an independent, because he's tired of our country only having two choices when it comes to elections. And then someone who everyone talks about a lot is Senator Jim Webb. He's a former U.S. Senator from Virginia. He served one term, would have won re-election handily, but opted to get out of the Senate. So he's a Vietnam veteran. He has appeal to both sides, Republicans and Democrats. So he's someone that a lot of people are watching as well. Okay, so this is, I had a lot to choose from when I was picking a cartoon to share with you. So, okay, is everyone ready? So, I won't go through, I'll tell you who all these people are. I'm sure most of you know who they are. Now, these are some of the 2016 Republican candidates. Every single person that you see on the screen has an established PAC or exploratory committee, or both, or several, and have said that they are, in fact, going to be seeking the nomination. The only caveat to that, again, is Mitt Romney, whose wife has come out in the last couple weeks and said adamantly that he's not running again for president of the United States. So I will believe that when I see it, I guess is the best way to put that. So we have Rand Paul. I'm going left to right, and I'm starting in the top row. So the U.S. Senator from Kentucky, Rand Paul, who is a Tea Party darling, if you will, and he's someone that I have been fascinated watching what's been happening with him. Can they see this? So if you haven't seen this, I don't know if you can see it because I can't see what you're seeing. According to Time Magazine, as you can see, he is the most interesting man in politics, and they may be right. And then right next to him is United States Senator from Texas, Ted Cruz. Now, Ted Cruz and Rand Paul sort of represent the Tea Party activists in the United States Senate. And I'm going to talk a little more about them when I do my summary quickly. And though they're both affiliated with the Tea Party, they have very different ideologies that it's going to make for an interesting 2 years in the Senate for the 2015 through 17. So then we have former U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania, Rick Santorum. He is not going away. United States Senator from Florida, Marco Rubio. Then next to him is Bob Portman. He's the U.S. Senator from Ohio. Then we have South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham and Tennessee Senator Bob Carter. So all of those current, with the exception of two on the front row, are U.S. senators right now, and they have indicated they are going to be running for the party's nomination for presidency. Now, the second row, this is sort of my wild card row. So we have Wisconsin Rep. Paul Ryan, who everyone knows, of course, and then Marsha Blackburn is a representative from Tennessee, and she's been very vocal, and she is viewed as, again, someone who might be a good vice presidential candidate pick. Former UN Ambassador John Bolton has been very adamant about the fact that he's running for president. That's all I'm going to say about that. And then we have Carly Fiorina, who's the former CEO and chairman of Hewlett Packard. She, the first woman to ever hold that position, and also she, in 2010, challenged U.S. Senator Barbara Boxer for her Senate seat, which she lost her challenge. So we have everyone who we all know, if we're here in New York State, is former New York State Governor George Pataki, who has been quietly making circles here in New York State and telling people that he is in fact running. He has an exploratory committee, and so we'll see what happens with that. Then we have, I know we have some folks on the line from Massapequa. Congressman Peter King, who almost every presidential election year for the last 2 decades has kind of said, I'm running, I'm not, I'm running, I'm not. He's a personal friend of mine, and I like him very much, so I always enjoy seeing how he approaches presidential election years. And then we have another Steve King, but he's from Iowa, and he, again, has made no qualms about the fact that he's interested in seeking higher office. And then Scott Walker, who I talked about briefly before, former Massachusetts senator, he lost in his reelection, in his bid to be in New Hampshire. We have Governor Chris Christie from New Jersey, Jeb Bush, the former governor from Florida,
Rachel,
the governor of Wisconsin, who easily won re-election, and also a recall vote. So he is someone that I think I'm watching to see what he does. It's going to be very interesting. Governor of Louisiana, Bobby Jindal, the governor of Arizona, Jan Brewer, and of course Rick Perry from Texas, Mike Pence, the governor from Indiana, and another campaign I'm going to be watching closely is John Kasich from Ohio, former U.S. senator and now governor, and doing a great job in Ohio from what he'll tell you. And then, of course, former Arkansas governor Mike Huckabee. So again, this is roughly 2/3 of the people who have presidential exploratory committees. There's a lot more Republicans out there, but these are the ones I wanted to share with you. So I'll leave you with some final thoughts. So on the presidential level, 89% of Mitt Romney's votes came from white people. And 56% of Barack Obama votes came from white people. Now, it's very clear to the Republicans they cannot win national elections if this continues. So it'll be interesting to see how the Republicans react over the next 2 years. And it's not going to get any easier for the Republicans. So in 2010, Obama won all but one swing state, and he almost won North Carolina. So Texas, Georgia, and Arizona are sort of the next states that everyone's thinking are going to be these swing states. And as we saw, we have quite a few candidates from Texas and Arizona who are toying with the presidential nomination. So I mentioned this before, so we have Rand Paul versus the Ted Cruz ideology, and the GOP is going to have to decide in the next couple years what it actually stands for. There's sort of the old guard in the Senate, the John McCains, if you will, of the U.S. Senate, and then you have the Tea Party darlings, the Ted Cruzes and the Rand Paul, but even they differ greatly. The example I use most is Ted Cruz is anti-immigration. He wants to shut the borders down. He wants to deport anyone who's here illegally. And Rand Paul is taking a very different approach, whereas he says we should monitor and try to control immigration where possible, but the Republican Party should also reach out to more minorities and try to be more welcoming because they should be including everyone. He still wants to beef up security on the borders, but he has a different approach to the situation. So what's going to be next in Congress? Immigration reform, either the president will try to do it by executive order, or this could be a chance for trade-offs for the Republicans and the Democrats. The Keystone XL pipeline, which the Republicans have been trying to move forward for many, many years, it passed in the House on Monday, and we had a few crossover votes from Democrats, so that was always interesting. And then the Affordable Care Act, which is something the Republicans have been very unhappy about since its implementation. And they have been very clear that they're going to continue that in the next Congress. So overall, GOP control of the Senate is not good for New York State. We're going to have two senators who have gone from being in the majority to being in the minority. And historically, that has never bode well for New York State. An example of that is shortly after Chuck Schumer had taken office in 1999, and we had two Democratic senators and the Republicans controlled the Senate back in 1999. Someone who had worked with me in Senator D'Amato's office called me. She was working for Senator Kay Bailey Hutchinson in Texas. And she said, I have to tell you, we're robbing New York State blind. We're taking your transportation money, and there's no one to stop us. So that's just a personal story about that. So we'll see how it plays out, because Senator Schumer is powerful. He's the third most powerful senator on the Democratic side. So hopefully he can help. So I'll just leave you with this, because it sort of shows you that everything I talked about is just absolute sheer speculation. Fairvote.org predicts that 85% of the incumbents that are in place now will keep and maintain their seats in the 2016 presidential election.